Actually, it wasn't that difficult. You know, you put smart people in the room, and from a technical side, it isn't that difficult. One of the things that we really haven't focused on, the questions I haven't really answered, that growers is burning in their minds is, what's in it for me? Okay, and that's really the problem that Nick and I will always work on is, from the grower standpoint, what's in it for me? Where do I get the win? What's my return on investment? So as we go through our journey, it's really, okay, how do they get what they want? We want to make a profit as a business. Nick wants to make a profit as a business. And certainly our grower has to be able to easily understand what's in it for them. So it's been a great journey, and you're really starting to see, as you know, this whole precision irrigation market evolves. We're starting to see that come together, and Rourke, you know, would obviously could speak to that very well from the grower perspective.
Great. Okay, so we have to keep moving along, and we want to launch Nick, but let's launch Nick really quick with the panel. Let's ask him a quick bullet question each. What do you want to make sure, from your point of view, that Nick covers? Chad, your turn. Go ahead. What do you want to hear from Nick?
I want to hear how he manages his data streams and delivers those to growers.
Could you come back and put your mic closer and say that again?
I want to hear how he manages the data stream and delivers it to growers.
Okay, Rourke?
I guess I am really interested now in how the verification is evolving of the changes that are happening at the field level.
Steve?
With the amount of data that we have, how do we take action on it?
Okay, very good. Nick, it's your show. Let's the rest of us turn our cameras off. And Andy, can you fix him up with a share screen? Yeah, we're going to have to wait while Nick shares his screen. He's got some really fancy slides. And thanks, panel. I didn't do a time check. Let's just go ahead. And we're waiting while Nick, are you clicking those? Nick is clicking the buttons.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yep, you're all set, Nick. Go for it.
Okay. So I first wanted to start off with kind of an introduction on how all of these components and pieces tie together, and it really is part of some of the questions that have already been brought up by the growers and the audience. But, you know, how does CropMetrics tie in with AgSense? And then how do we bring all of that information back to, more importantly, the grower themselves? You'll see up here in the upper right corner, we really start with one of the first components is a soil moisture probe out connected to an AgSense data logger and telemetry device that Terry explained what they call their AquaTrack version. That data is then collected from the field and delivered to the virtual optimizer or the CropMetrics web portal, all wirelessly. Again, that was another component that, to make it easier to use for the grower, we found that no matter how much technology was located out in the field, because of so many other things the grower has going on a daily basis, and kind of hitting on Rourke's statement about 90 seconds per field, we knew we couldn't rely on growers being able to go out to the field and gather this data, that we had to collect it all wirelessly and send it back to an easy, accessible point, such as a website. From there, with the CropMetrics software, we can then interpolate, view, analyze all of that soil moisture probe data, and then send it back out to that local agronomist, which again we've all identified as extremely important. None of our solutions or tools that we make available or offer to the grower customer, none of them come without a local specialist. So we've spent a lot of time developing what we call a precision data specialist network across the country, really to hone in on that local agronomic expertise. More importantly, that local agronomy, they go through some very specialized and high-level training to be able to interpret all the data and the information and the tools we provide to, again, make it easier for the grower to adopt and their own management practices on a day-to-day basis. From there, once the data specialist or the agronomist and the grower are able to analyze and view the data, it can be sent right back to the cloud or the web portal, which then we can generate something like a variable rate irrigation prescription. Again, taking that information now and sending it back to the pivot controller, all wirelessly, and making that pivot now automatically change speed based on different field variables, whether that's soil type or topography, maybe aerial imagery throughout the season. But again, bringing that information data into an actionable item or an actionable cause that the grower can take use with. And as Terry mentioned, is evolving into the precision irrigation. You can see over there on the right-hand side where we've led to today is really the remote monitoring access and the data access from a mobile standpoint. That is really transitioning quickly, where only a year or two ago everything was relied on from a website, where now growers don't even want to go to a website. They don't even want to open up their computer. All they want to do is have that information, data, and full controls, such as a field commander, all controlled by the palm of their hand to their mobile devices. So that is the big technology transformation here happening just within the last year. As we take a step back now and kind of give an introduction on CropMetrics specifically, we're a precision ag company specializing in precision irrigation. It makes us unique where we're not trying to do everything offered in the precision ag realm, but really focused on that precision irrigation. Myself, besides being the president of CropMetrics, I'm also a farmer here in eastern Nebraska. I farm about 2,000 acres of corn and soybeans. So everything that we do has a strong focus on the grower. We do not develop anything unless we know it's going to be easily adopted and accessible from a grower standpoint. And as you see that last statement, they're built for profit. We know it's going to be a very challenging year based on commodity prices and opportunity for profit margins. Well, this technology has to be able to fit and have a play even in those extremely tough margin times to help improve the overall profitability, not only from a farm basis, but as Rorik and Steve alluded to, really from a field-by-field individual basis, and being able to adopt these technologies on each specific field and then customize it for each individual field. When we look at what CropMetrics has to offer, it's really a multitude of different tools and technologies. Why? Because it's a systems approach. What we really want to stress is there isn't one magic bullet out there in farming, and growers know that. There's not going to be one input that they apply that's going to give them the biggest bang for the buck. More importantly, it's a systems approach agronomically. And the same applies to precision irrigation specifically, that there's a lot of tools and options available on gathering this highly specialized information and data to irrigation. The challenge is being able to take all of these different tools and technologies and implement them into an integrated approach, and how we can do that not only easily, but more importantly, effectively. And so that is really what we've focused on, building a software platform and the tools and solutions that bring all of these tools not only into one centralized location, but having them all work together to enhance one another and provide a more informed solution to the grower. And as we look at that, it's really important to understand the crop water use dynamics, and that's what I want to explain in this slide. You'll see down in the lower right-hand corner that the fuel gauge, it's really jumping back sporadically from the different levels of red, green, and blue, whether that's refill or too full of your soil moisture. But that's one of the starting points we like to say is a soil moisture probe, for example, that I mentioned earlier, connected to an AgSense device. We need to be able to monitor and measure that soil moisture throughout the season. And that is really the fuel gauge. A great analogy that we like to use that really relates well to growth, the fuel gauge in the vehicle you drive every day. If you took that fuel gauge out of your car or truck today, when would you more commonly refuel that vehicle? The most common answer is they would refuel it more often than not. The penalty for running dry or running out of gas is much more severe than playing it safe and simply keeping that gas tank full. The same applies to irrigation management today. A lot of growers without a good soil moisture probe out in the field don't have a good indication of not only how much water is available, but when they need to accurately start and stop that pivot or to take advantage of the best water use efficiency possible. Soil moisture probe is one component. And as you hear, what this is really showing is the crop water use by different growth stages throughout the season. And you can see how that adjusts from early on in a crop growth cycle where it utilizes a lot of the water from the upper foot of the profile. And where later in the season, as that crop develops and the rooting depth grows deeper throughout the soil profile, there's more water utilized throughout that entire soil profile. This is no secret. This isn't nothing new. What we're really trying to show here is the importance of understanding how that water is being utilized from each specific stage, each specific growing degree day throughout the season, and being able to adjust and react to that with actionable items very quickly. The soil moisture probe is a very good starting point. But what the one limitation of the soil moisture probe is, it gives you an accurate picture of today or right now. But the challenge with what comes with and all the other data and information that's available to us that Steve mentioned is, what happens tomorrow or what happens in the next 7 days so that I can plan my irrigations accordingly based on the future of crop growth development and the weather. The weather is really an unknown. And so what kind of a hot topic right now is modeling and using these models in precision ag to help predict our outcome. And we're doing here with some of the software we're doing, but we're bringing in irrigation scheduling models that integrate crop growth models along with weather models to predict how much water we're going to need to apply to your future and the long-term future. Not only are these models utilizing that agronomic crop growth information and the weather information, but these models are uniquely able to integrate the soil moisture probes. So the soil moisture probes are able to update those models with real-time information throughout the growing season to really fine-tune and better accurately predict on a field-by-field basis what your current situation is. Now, as we're able to evolve with more of this wireless data accessibility from AgSense, we can now seamlessly transition into bringing in real-time as-applied data from the pivot to update these models accordingly and, again, adjust constantly throughout the season to accomplish our goals for a more precise irrigation management. So what are all some of the technology that we're really trying to bring together in this systems approach? As I mentioned, the soil moisture probe is the starting point. The irrigation or the water balance approach to irrigation scheduling and the overall model approach that we're implementing and bringing in all of these other pieces of data. The crop modeling and being able to monitor accurate rooting depth, which we know can vary by hybrid and or soil type. The different soil types throughout the field. Once we're able to all this data together and make a more informed irrigation decision for the field, then how do we take that and adjust that throughout the field for the different soil types and topographies and the different variables that play into our water holding capacity. And then it brings us into the varied irrigation specifically, whether it's speed control, which is the most common and easiest to get started with. But we can also, the software is also able to do nozzle or zone control for those systems that have the capability. Weather data. Just as we talk about the importance of weather data, whether it's the weather forecast in general or specific growing degree data information and EP specific to that field, we are finding that it's even more important for field-specific weather data. And you see that picture in the lower left-hand corner with a weather station. And now, bring another component is bringing in this weather station data to fine-tune our overall bigger degree of weather data with the overall forecasting that you see there. And most importantly, as we talked about, none of these tools and technologies are really applicable unless you don't have the local agronomic support. And that's where we, again, spend a great deal of time and focus on developing and training what we call our local precision data specialists, which are those local agronomists, to really take and assist this grower throughout the season to make sure they're able to fully utilize the information and nothing gets overlooked. That's the ultimate goal. As we look at it, this is all delivered through our product, what we call Virtual Optimizer. And it's a cloud-based product which is accessible through a website, virtualoptimizer.com, or mobile devices, whether that's your iPhone or Droid or soon-to-be iPad coming to this growing season. We're now focused on, again, bringing in all of these tools into one place, but not only bringing them into for a display, but having them work together. And really what that looks like, kind of hitting on Chad's question, how can, that seems like a really complicated task, bringing in all those different pieces of information, tools and technologies into one place, and making it simple to understand from the grower's standpoint. And here's an example of our dashboard. This is an example of bringing in the agronomics where you see the crop growth stage up top, integrated right on top of your soil moisture probe graph, and the daily water use, where that bar chart with the blue bars are either rain or irrigation event indicated from the different icons, and the red bars are the crop water use for each individual day. And you can see really side by side how that crop water use aligns with your current crop growth stage. More importantly, the system is fully customizable. Again, going on that grower focus. And what I've learned on my own farm is models are traditionally a black box design that applies the same model across all the different fields. And it was really difficult to adjust those models. Well, not with this irrigation model through the Virtual Optimizer. This lets you go in and from this interface right here, you can drag any one of those, you can click and drag and drop any one of those growth stages and adjust them to the actual date that they occur on. And that automatically shifts the entire model. Right where you see my cursor scrolling around in the middle of the screen, that shows you a snapshot where this screen was taken at that particular point in time, where everything to the left with the solid blue line is actual recorded data from the soil moisture probe collected AgSense device and fed right into Virtual Optimizer. Everything to the right is the future or the predicted soil water use and crop growth stages from all that other information and data we have available. So again, it's now taking all of that data and turning it into actionable information that you can quickly grab and utilize all in one place. Hitting on one of Rorik's questions, how can we now validate what is happening with all of this information from our pivot data? Again, kind of going to the collaboration timeline. Now with AgSense and the constant evolving of this wireless data, we can bring in that pivot information from AgSense automatically into this. So it's not only recorded from a record-keeping standpoint, but again, we can justify and validate what was done out in the field in accordance with the current agronomic conditions and the current weather conditions. So at the end of the season, you can get a very detailed report of not only how much water you applied and when, but it's also going to automatically tag the growth stage that was currently happening at that particular water application, and the rainfall and all the other weather information applicable to that individual application. And it really lets you kind of fine-tune and analyze and improve your overall irrigation management for future seasons and crop periods. So having said that, this next slide is really looking at the challenge of bringing in all this information and data. As I said, you can see that soil moisture probe fuel gauge jumping back and forth sporadically. Not only is it jumping back and forth, but you can see the optimal zone, the green zone, changes dependent on the crop growth stage. As that crop growth stage and the rooting depth penetrates to 1 foot, 2 foot, and 3 foot for each of the different growth stages, that available water content through the entire soil profile changes. And that makes it even more difficult to understand what your soil moisture probe is reading. Well, now with the CropMetrics system, you can see an example here now with the soil moisture probe and having that crop growth information right next to it. We can now do a better job of understanding what's happening in the field and predicting on what we need to do to match the crop requirements, the crop water use requirements at each of those particular growth stages. Again, not only on a field-by-field basis, but with this system, it really lets us pull it into the next step and taking all of that information now and applying it on an acre-by-acre basis with variable rate irrigation. And I'm not going to hit too much on this, but we've really evolved into the next version of variable rate irrigation, which we're just going to be releasing a new version of a web-based, cloud-based variable rate irrigation software that's accessible to anybody, very easy to use, and automated to use from our web-based virtual optimizer platform, which will be coming next week, actually. But not only does it now gather all of this information and create a variable rate irrigation prescription, but it also monitors that variable rate irrigation throughout the season and can update that variable rate irrigation real time based on the ever-changing dynamics such as weather, crop growth stage.
Nick, this is Dan. I know we're running very short on time with you, so I wanted to ask you a question. This sounds great, but have you actually been able to demonstrate yield benefits, particularly we talked about the commodity pricing?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we did a few years ago, working with the Nebraska Water Balance Alliance and NIA out in the Pacific Northwest, was we developed a way to trial the variable rate irrigation, which is what we call the 30-30 trial, which very easily adjusts the variable rate irrigation prescription from VRI to the grower's normal legacy or flat rate, which you see in those blue slices. So a very traditional approach to, say, a field strip trial, normally applied with seeding or other inputs such as nitrogen or fertilizer, but now we're trying to bring that into a variable rate irrigation approach. And here's an example we did in Nebraska, where we not only brought in the yield at the end of the season to measure that effect, but we also put out different soil moisture probes. And in the heavy zone and the light zone, side by side, one in the heaviest soil type, VRI, and one in the flat rate, VRI. And here's a result of that soil moisture probe data, which we don't want to get into the details of this, but looking at a side-by-side comparison, the soil moisture probes are able to monitor the moisture at each of the individual depths that you see indicated on the left axis of this graph, from 4 inches down to 36 inches. And not being an expert at reading this, if you look at the non-VRI or the flat rate compared to the VRI rate, what do you notice differently between those two graphs?
Great. Okay. Well, Nick, we've got about 1 more minute for you to wrap up, and please go ahead.
All right. Yep. I'll finish up. I'll fly through the next couple slides here and wrap up and transition into David. And really what this is showing is a lot of available water not being utilized with a flat rate circumstance where they are over applying. which with the VRI rate, we're not only able to cut back on our water costs, but we're also able to save water and achieve greater yields, which you see here in this example where we're able to achieve over 25 bushel yield response. And I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly here to show some more examples of the effects of variable rate irrigation and the yield benefits we're able to achieve for different application rates by matching to different soil types. All in the end, our ultimate goal is really being able to optimize and monitor this water throughout the growing season and under different circumstances through this integrated data approach. So with that, I will open that up to questions.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And actually, Nick, what happened at the beginning of your presentation, your camera went off, which is fine because your slides were wonderful. But you are pretty good looking, so if you can turn your camera back on, that would be great. And as we asked the panel to join as well, panel, can you turn your cameras on? Nick, just a couple of quick bullet questions for you. Your slides were all about corn. You do more than corn?
Yes, we use corn as a basic example here in the Midwest. But yeah, the software is fully customizable for different crops for different regions.
And then I've got a question for you to answer on Terry's behalf. We've been talking about pivots all day. Is that all Terry does, or does Terry do other irrigation systems?
Yeah, no, the great thing with the AgSense, now that we're connected with the AgSense, is we're able to bring in all the different irrigation components that AgSense utilizes, whether that is the pivots, the soil moisture probes, or the pump systems that he mentioned with the CropLink device that they offer.
Okay, and so now I want to throw a question to both Rorik and Steve, well, actually to all of the panel. Rorik, let's start with you. You made a big point earlier about the time sink, that just thinking about all this stuff is a time sink, and information overload. So what is it about Nick's stuff that solves that problem? Or does it solve that problem for you?
It does, and it's an evolution. Nick and Terry both talked about, and I asked about the timelines, and that has been interesting to watch, to say the least. But also, we've been involved in a lot of those conversations at the field level and at working with them directly. So, you know, it starts to give you a warm, fuzzy feeling about how you look at or how you implement some of these strategies on your farm, and the fact that they continue to evolve, that they put these crop specialists at your disposal. So if you have a particular question that is relevant to your farm, that particular crop, maybe it's a field of potatoes you're growing, or sugar beets, or dryable beans, they need to know that their equipment is being, that is being run there. So how do you not only be able to access that, but feel good about the recommendations that they're making for you?
Steve, your thoughts on how real this stuff is, and does it manage the information, and does it economize on your use of time?
Yeah, I mean, the information is real. The way that it's presented, it does save us time. I mean, like we kind of talked about earlier, you know, back before they called it precision ag, we were going around with our programs and taking a notepad and sketching out degrees and where we needed to slow down the pivot and speed up the pivot, and using walking out in the field and walking each quadrant of the field. And now, you know, the program just lays it all out on the computer for you, so it's definitely a time saver.
So Chad, the question for you, let's talk about iPhones. So suppose that I need an iPhone 5, but I'm going, oh no, the 6 is about to come out, I don't want to buy it. So from your point of view as a researcher, knowing what's over the horizon, the things that can be hung on all this stuff later as it develops, is there any reason to wait, or do you just go ahead and deploy and then add on the cool stuff later?
I think a smart decision would, if you're looking to get started, is to start slow and build from there. So there's no reason to put off a potential savings that you can harvest or potential gains you can make. But just know that things are going to evolve and that you can take advantage of that as you roll out your investments.
Let's go around the horn again and just leave open. Oh, I'm sorry, Nick, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to hit on that, so that's a great question. And actually, Rorik and I have talked about a lot before where, this technology is always going to be evolving no matter what. No matter how great it looks today, it's always going to continuously improve. But until you get started, you're only falling behind. So even though you might not utilize everything, it's really important to get started to at least be collecting the data so you can continuously starting to learn on your own farm. I know that's, Rorik can probably hit more on that, but the sooner they can get started, the more they learn and can progress as the technology evolves with it.
So let's pivot back to Rorik, but before I do that, let's ask Dave Little to join us. Dave, can you turn your camera on, because we want to have our next presenter, agronomist guy, be part of the conversation before we pitch the whole program back over to him. Let's go around the horn, though, again and ask Rorik. Rorik, do you have any questions specifically for Nick?
Well, he's alluded to it. I mean, we've been doing this for some time, and I really don't want to downgrade what we've done in the past in terms of developing that baseline. And yet the baseline now changes because of the ability to acquire that information, and you got to be willing to trust it. And if I'll leave you with anything, is that level of trust is whether it's probes, whether it's changing that rate of irrigation, validating what your well's putting out, or a sprinkler package, what it's delivering. I mean, there's a level of trust that you can get yourself really in a dither over all of these components, all of these things that Nick alluded to in his presentation. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of balls to juggle in your own operation, but I'm the same way. Dive in.
Steve.
Yes.
Your questions for Nick.
I thought he had a pretty good presentation. I don't have anything else to add this time.
Okay. So, Chad, do you have any thoughts or questions for Nick?
I'm just wondering how much is enough, or what's the minimum set of stuff to put out in the field to drive your models to get good information out the other side?
That's a good question, and there's really no requirements. And again, it's really flexible and customizable from the grower standpoint in each field. You can start with the bare minimum that simply runs off the raw data and the models, or you can start to add more of the components, such as a soil moisture probe that will feed in and enhance the models, or a pivot controller from Terry to be able to utilize the variable rate irrigation. But there isn't any requirements. You can start with the bare minimum and add pieces as you progress and learn more how to utilize them.
Okay, David, thanks for joining us. David's an agronomist, and so every time he speaks for, 20, 40, 50 farmers. So from that point of view, what questions do you have for Nick? Oops, your mic's not on. Remember, you're a proxy for all those other guys. You got to turn your mic on.
Very good. So probably the biggest question that I have is in regard to support. As an agronomist for growers, and we're implementing these technologies on the farm, how do you enable support to the grower?
Yeah, and that's key. So it goes back to what we talked about with the local agronomist support. So all the support falls back to that local agronomy, because I don't want to be sitting in eastern Nebraska trying to be giving recommendations to Steve Berg out there on the west part of the U.S. Instead, we rely on those local experts to provide that information and support.
Okay, Dan, do you have any other final questions for Nick before we wrap this segment?
No, I think we are good.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you, panel. Don't go away, panel. Stick around for just a minute. We want to do a little bit of segue stuff before we actually let loose of everybody and get David going. I do want to do a time check here. We have gone long, but we have about 32 minutes remaining and plenty of time to take care of the next presentation and still leave time for questions at the end. We elected to let the discussions go long because the discussions were good. Also, we still have more questions coming in from the audience, which we will address when David's done as well, if they are not already addressed. I'm just going to throw a question up for one of our assistants. Ron, is there any question in chat that is so urgent and relevant right now that we should answer it now, or can we hold them?
I think we should hold, but we have some really great questions, some of which have been answered, but we can hit the ones that we want to hit later.
And by the way, the dialogue in chat looks to me to be kind of valuable, and so we will capture it and put it up in the archive on our website along with the video playback of all of this stuff if you want to go check it out. I do want to say thank you to our crew in the background. You just heard Ron, and Andy, and Laura do magnificent work in keeping this keeping all the strings attached while we're flying. I did mention the archive. If you just go to our website, either etaccelerator.com or emergingtechaccelerator.com, go to the events and archive.